The limited series Made was released on Netflix in fall 2021. It kept showing up in my queue and I was like, what is this about? I saw the actress Anika Noni in the press kit, but never got a chance to watching it until the Christmas break. So during the Christmas holiday break, I binge watched the series. I dove right in. Much to my surprise, it was a story of a young woman by the name of Alex struggling with the realities of an abusive relationship, custody battle with her child's abusive father, and how she navigated the broken legal system and got her life on track in order to pull herself out of the domestic abusive situation to save her life and the life of her daughter. The series presented serious issues of domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence, as well as how broken the legal system is to help women in these situations. So I was inspired to do this video and candidly discuss the resources available for women fleeing intimate violence, the realities of custody, so that if you know someone in this situation, you can inform them, share this video. And in my work, I've helped several clients who have been in abusive relationships, and I've also have a lot of experience and insight in helping women to navigate when going through the legal system, because that's another traumatic ordeal on top of the trauma of the domestic violence situation. Early in my legal career, I worked with an organization by the name of GEMS, which helps women and young girls who have been victims of commercial sex exploitation. So I know a lot about this topic and how the system works. If you're new, my name is Miriam Greenidge and I'm an attorney. And on this channel, we discuss a wide range of legal topics, whether that's what's going on in pop culture and the news, or what the news does not want us to know about, where the law meets technology, or legal topics that come up in movies. No matter the topic, it's a channel that you can learn from. And if you like that sort of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I appreciate your support, and share with anyone, of course, if you think this video will be helpful to them. Now let's get into the video. So again, to reiterate, the limited series Made is about a young woman by the name of Alex who fled an abusive relationship and then finds a job cleaning houses as she fights to provide for her child and build a better future for both of them. In the middle of the night, she planned an escape. She packed a go bag, got dressed, took her daughter, got into her car. Unfortunately, it's a story that many, many women have to do. So let's unpack some of the themes that were addressed in the series. So just some information so you know a little background about domestically abusive relationship. It is understood that domestic violence is part of a gender violence, and that many, many more women than men are the victims of physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. This is just statistically proven. Even in instances when women strike back or engage in mutual violence, it's usually the woman who is most likely to be hurt, both physically and emotionally. Women who strike back in self-defense are also often arrested along with the batterer. So although there are percentages of men who are abused, this video is specifically geared toward the challenges that women encounter. Of course, the information can be helpful to men in terms of navigating the legal system, but the experience discussed are geared toward women's experiences. So the first theme: there can be abuse in the absence of violence. Made gave us an excellent portrayal of what domestic abuse looks like, the cycles of abuse, the resources and legal help that are set up to help abused women. What I appreciated most about the show is that it was nuanced. The abuse was not physical abuse per se. This is important caveat, because there are a whole host of behaviors that many consider abusive that do not involve violence, including restricting the woman's access to money, tracking their movement, not being able to hang out with friends and family, taking their transportation away. If there's only one vehicle, the woman's not allowed to use the car, monitoring emails, cutting them off from friends and family. The woman may even be forbidden from working, or if she works, she has to hand over all of her earnings to her abusive partner or controlling partner. He files all the taxes, handles all the expenses and bills. She has no access or idea what is going on financially. He keeps her in the dark and totally dependent on him. She has no identity in the relationship, essentially, and she's totally reliant on him. All of this equates to abusive conduct in the absence of violence. So abuse can happen without the man laying a hand on a woman, by controlling aspects of the woman's life. Every relationship differs, but what is most important with all abusive relationships is the varying tactics used by abusers to gain and maintain a disproportionate amount of power and control over the victim. So it's about a power control dynamic. We saw this in May, that she was not working, she was not in school, she had no income, she was totally reliant on her child's father, she had no transportation, living in Washington State. So this showed a disproportionate amount of control that her partner had.
What are you talking about?
I gave it back to the prick. I was sick looking at an its car in my driveway.
You didn't do that. You didn't do that. You gave it back to him.
Yeah.
No. No.
Look, if you want us to do charity work,
No.
you can
John.
donate it to the Red Cross.
John, that's my fucking car. That is my life. That is my only way for me to leave here. John, that's
Late
the
for
only way
work.
for me to do anything.
I'm late for work!
Another theme, women don't even know when they're being abused. Research shows it can take approximately 7 attempts before a survivor permanently leaves an abusive partner. So imagine a woman you know fleeing in the night 7 times throughout the course of the relationship. Traumatic over and over again. Why so many attempts, you may ask? Well, there's several factors as to why most abused women don't even know that they're in an abusive relationships. It's sort of like the brain is hijacked into fight or flight. And when dealing with fight or flight, the woman can't even acknowledge or deal with accepting the fact that they're in an abusive situation. So part of that awareness is shut down. That part that helps us process what is going on in the environment, that's essentially hijacked for the fight or flight while a woman is trying to plan an escape for her survival. Then there's also denial, shame, embarrassment, post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. No one wants to admit that they're being in an abusive partnership. It's not until others come into the picture and challenge and bring awareness to the victims through therapy that eventually helps the woman come to terms and then acknowledge the abuse. Also, abusers and victims alike may both minimize the abuse or deny what is occurring in the relationship. Denial works in every aspect of abusive cycle. Denial is what often delays the survivor from leaving the relationship or makes the survivor return to the abusive relationship. As we saw in Maid, Alex was in an emotionally abusive relationship that was teetering to become physically abusive. And she didn't even know it. There was no physical abuse per se. There were no assaults to her or her child, but there were outbursts, drinking, punching walls. When she tried to share the abuse with her father, he was also in denial. With friends, they rationalized it, saying, please give him a chance, which is what many people do close to the victim. Also, because of the subtlety of emotional abuse, victims and family members are often left questioning whether or not abuse in fact happened, because again, there's no physical proof. The incident is usually chalked up to the couple being in a disagreement or growing through something. That's how family and friends rationalize it. Denial is a defense that helps us. There are many reasons why we use denial, including avoidance of physical or emotional pain, fear, shame, or conflict. We're actually wired to deny for survival. It's the first defense that we learn as a child. And people deny out of self-preservation and the fear of being punished. As adults, we deny the truth when it might mean we'd have to take action we don't want to. As we saw with Alex, when she went to social services and explained her situation, she was actually in denial that she was in an abusive relationship and homeless as a result of fleeing. This is because once acknowledging the abuse, she will then have to take the next steps, which is moving into a shelter, troubleshooting that, dealing with this new environment, which is all overwhelming. Confronting the truth forces her to face not only the pain of the abuse, the humiliation and the loss, but the possibility of breaking up her family, which many women don't want to do. Frequently, partners of addicts or abusers are all on this merry-go-round of denial.
We don't have anywhere to sleep tonight.
Want to call the cops now? It's not too late.
And say what? That he didn't hit me?
The addicts and abusers can be loving and even responsible at times and promise to stop their drug or abuse, but soon it returns to breaking that trust and the promise. So denial is a cycle, and everyone in the abuser's and victim's life play a role in it. Now, family court. Domestic violence is usually either a criminal or a civil matter. The victim will need to decide between whether to pursue criminality or the civil aspect. However, the criminal case usually proceeds without the victim's permission. For domestic violence, the prosecution will use all relevant material and evidence to charge the accused and attempt to prove the conviction. However, the victim may decide not to pursue criminal charges and use the details in family court for custody. The family court can help with custody, visitation, and matters of divorce. So most states have created domestic violence court that specifically deal with abuse. There are about 300 courts nationwide that have special processing systems for domestic violence cases. In May, because Alex escaped with her child, it was a family court issue because a child was involved and custody had to be first figured out among the two parents. It was not criminal case because he never hit her. There was no assaults or battery. We saw Alex trying to figure out custody for her daughter, full custody, because the child's father was abusive, also abusing alcohol, and then he retained a lawyer and was able to challenge her. So the challenge for determining custody across all courts in this country is the best interest of the child. And there are several factors that the court looks at. I mean, too often the court gets this wrong, even though there's these factors. However, the court will always consider allegations of domestic violence and child abuse by the parents. In fact, by state, the court must consider the effects of domestic violence on the child's best interest in order to make a determination of custody. But like I said, the court gets this wrong many times. The family court system is unprepared for the complexities presented by domestic violence, often giving little consideration to the risk of harm to the woman and the children, compounding the trauma that both of the children and the women face. The court process is still influenced by outdated ideas about abuse and abusers, held not just by judges, but by lawyers and social workers who are supposed to assist victims. Absent convincing proof of a parent hitting a child, some family courts seem to view domestic violence as unrelated to parenting. Yes, those who work in the court system believe that once a parent is not hitting the child, then the child is not at risk. I know, this is ludicrous. Also, judges don't even really understand the complex dynamics of domestic violence and sometimes conclude that once a couple splits up, the toxicity will end and the abusive spouse will all of a sudden become a decent parent. So to sum it up, the court gets it wrong in terms of considering the best interest of their child. Now, custody disputes. Custody battle is often the most contentious and dysfunctional aspects of domestic violence situation. Although domestic violence is one of many factors that the court considers in determining custody, it's even possible for a judge to grant custody to a parent who has committed domestic violence. I know, it's ludicrous. Furthermore, even if you are awarded custody, your abuser will usually still receive some form of visitation, also known as parenting time, except in extreme circumstances, which I mentioned before, hitting the child. And this is extremely unsettling for the victim. This is because the court sees it as usually a child's best interest to have a relationship with both parents, even when one parent has committed domestic violence or is violent. This is always shocking to the victims who want full custody and naturally want to punish the abuser and protect their child. by not allowing the abuser to see the child. The only way to limit visitation to the abuser's parent will be that the victim will have to show proof to the judge that the child's physical, mental, or emotional health would be endangered by having parenting time. So if parenting time were granted, it would actually undermine the child's well-being. And the judge may then limit or require a third party to supervise the visitation. This is usually the case when there's drugs or alcohol abuse by the abusive parent, in which case the judge will limit visitation. For example, the judge may order supervised visitation where a third party, like a social worker or a responsible family member, supervises the parenting time. However, supervised visitation is usually temporary, lasting up until the judge determines that unsupervised visitation can occur safely. If you're concerned about your safety during pickup or drop off of your child, you can also ask the judge to do the exchange at a police precinct or another safe or public place. This is what some parents opt for, so that the exchange can happen in a public place if it's extremely contentious between both parties. We see in May that the judge condemned Alex for kidnapping her child. We'll discuss parental kidnapping in a bit, and awarding custody to the father for a short period of time because Alex was still unstable. So in the absence of physical abuse to the child and the other parent, many judges are inclined to just give shared custody. It's not convincing enough that the parent who is the abuser be punished if there's no proof of abuse. Emotional abuse and physical abuse. That's another thing that came up. What was tricky in Alex's case is that there was no reported incidences of physical violence. There were no police reports, no witnesses, no hospital records, only her word against her child's father's word in proving domestic abuse. But there was alcohol abuse and an instant when he hit the wall or he broke a window, if I remember correctly, and glass fell in the daughter's hair. That was enough for her to run, but it was not enough to recognize as abusive. This is another failure of the court system in dealing with emotional abuse. The court is unable to document, so it doesn't know how to place it. Unfortunately, it's not until physical abuse starts to happen that the court recognizes, and then the woman is already further traumatized. Again, this is due to outdated principles of abuse. And asking a woman to document their abuse is often a slap in the face, because often the abusive attack happened by their husband or their boyfriend. And this is later followed by love bombing. Because of the relationship of intimacy, there's less likely to be a report if compared to if she were attacked by a stranger. Like I mentioned earlier, she doesn't see the abuse as abuse, so she's unlikely to report her husband. Secondly, the woman happens in the middle of the night and she's fleeing in the middle of the night with her backpack, the clothes on her back. The last thing she's thinking about is paperwork to show that she was abused several times. Parental kidnapping, another theme that came up in May. How can I kidnap my child? The answer to this question is very complicated, and it may depend on several factors. There are criminal laws on parental kidnapping, also known as custodial interference or child concealment or parental abduction, depending on what state one may live in. In some states, it may be against the law to take children out of state if it violates a custody order or if there's an active custody case pending. In other states, the act of taking the child out of the state may not be illegal unless the parent conceals or hides the child from the other parent. So it pretty much depends on if there's a court order for custody and one of the parent violates it and takes the child, and if there's no custody order, it may be illegal, but it depends on the state. However, if parental kidnapping occurs, the parent who took the child can mitigate punishment by showing that the child was in harm's way and that was the reason for taking the child. In May, we see Alex fleeing with Maddie without a custody order, and then it was challenged by the father, where the court allowed shared custody between the both parents. Because the court saw that there was no threat of violence to Maddie, visitation was fine. This theme showed another failure of the court system. Even when physical evidence is present or even chronic abuse, this still was not enough for the court to automatically award custody to the mother. the mother still had to go through the court channels and prove that they should be awarded custody. DV is not the automatic default for awarding custody to the domestic violence survivor, as we saw in Maid, that the father was allowed to see the child because absent of proof of domestic violence or violent behavior, it was fine according to the court. Okay, best interest of the child. The court often drops the ball and does not do enough to protect the child and the victim. Judges rely heavily on the input of attorneys appointed to advocate for the child's best interest, also known as the guardian ad litem, for determining the best interest of the child. Yet they do not have enough resources of evidence collection or expert help. They lack training about domestic abuse, so they make the wrong call a lot of times. Some guardian ad litems just meet with the child for about 15 minutes and think that they know everything about the child, and then the court takes the guardian ad litem's recommendation as gospel. It's frightening, really. There's no clear definition as to what is the best interest of the child, so it leaves it up to each individual guardian ad litem to define it for themselves. And absolutely, they don't do enough digging and forensic to see what exactly is the best interest of the child. Another theme that the series touched upon was grandparents having no rights. And I thought this was interesting just to touch on. The law in the United States do not give grandparents any automatic rights to see their grandchildren or to have custody over their grandchildren. Typically, there are only two scenarios where grandparents have the right to see their children. One, there are specific circumstances that will warrant intervention, such as a prior relationship between the child and the grandparent, and two, the parents are deceased. That is the only time that parents can petition to be the custodial parent, and then when both parents have passed. Otherwise, there's no guaranteed right to see and visit grandchildren, and each state has their own provision regarding the rights granted to grandparents. In the EU, in the European Union, it is enshrined in law that grandchildren have the right to have a relationship with their grandparents if they so choose to. So, thought I'd throw that in there. Another theme that I wanted to bring up that the series didn't really touch upon, but I think it's important, is that women are not believed, and there's distrust of a woman's story of abuse. And I looked at this study, according to a study done in 2019, reported by Domestic Abuse Intervention Services. It's a nonprofit in Dane County, Wisconsin. They did a study summarizing the observations from its Court Watch program. So staff in the program monitored proceedings to gauge how well courts responded to requests for restraining orders. The study involved monitoring a family court judge who denied restraining order requested by women who claimed that her partner tried to throw her off of a balcony and pointed a gun in front of her child. The court told her, and I quote, "Take a deep breath and try to co-parent more effectively, because injunctions make family cases worse." Yes, this is what a judge told a woman where her spouse threatened to throw her off a balcony. And then the court had rationale that the woman's medical records were not severe enough and that it was only one incident. Yeah, this is how a judge surmised not giving an injunction and a restraining order. Out of this world. Another important theme is character witness. As we see in Maid, we see her struggling to get her mother to vouch for her character, because this is an important factor for the court to determine if the mother is fit or for the best interest of the child. Character witness is so pivotal for women in domestic violence disputes. This is why, if you're in an abusive relationship, I implore you, tell someone, boss, colleague, clerk at a store, anyone that you feel that you can trust, because this is so important. A character reference letter to the court can be an important part of a disputed custody case. Character reference letters go a long way. They're typically written by someone who knows the parent. A character reference letter gives the judge insight into the case by offering a third party's perspective on the parent's relationship with the child. It also gives the judge more information about who the parent is. Does that person have community and healthy people around them? How they take care of their child, and why they should have custody. When parents can't agree on custody, a judge or other court official decides the court orders, as we saw in Maid. So each parent submits to the court detailing the arrangement they want and the character witness testimonies that they have gathered, along with evidence that proves that their proposed arrangement is best for the child. So if you or someone you know is being abused, tell someone, I implore you. It makes such a different outcome in liberating you from the abuse, as well as the custody battle down the line that you will encounter if a child is involved. Alex was insulated. She did not have many friends. She was not working, was not in school. She was estranged from her father and her mother, who was also mentally ill. So she did not have a lot of people that she can rely on in this area. Like many women, she had a dearth of people that she can turn to until the series developed. Treatment plan. DV shelters and programs are excellent for women, for giving women a foundation and validating them and helping them take back their power. How do they do that? How do they give these women a sense of self after they've been through an extremely traumatic experience? It's called a treatment plan, developed by psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and there's a universal system used across all DV shelters and programs. And it involves giving the victim first a place to live, so that they can get their security and safety and feel safe and secure. Next, employment, so that the woman can have independence, dignity, and purpose. While doing this, they are enrolled in therapy and they're getting life skills. The therapy helps them develop awareness that they were victims and now survivors of an abusive relationship. There's also parenting classes and therapy to deal with the psychological impacts of the abuse. Life skills that I mentioned is curtailed in abusive relationship and stunted. What it does is inject more self-esteem because the woman has been stripped of her self-esteem. Women who have experienced multiple traumas may very little resilience to deal with the current trauma, which is why the support is so needed. Having purpose is so important for restoring self-esteem, and this is why these DV shelters inundate the women with so many programs, so that they could feel stable, have something to do, feel purposeful, and feel confident. Treatment plan is pivotal for the victim rebuilding her life. As we saw with Alex, as she started to get the foundation underneath her, she was employed, she had a stable home environment, she reapplied to college, she was starting to feel confident and purposeful, and then she was able to start writing because that gave her purpose and meaning also, and it was therapy for the traumatic experience, and then she was able to share that with other women. So DV shelters have a wealth of resources available to help women restore this self-esteem, and it's so important that women have that so they can know who they are and they can regain their identity. So that's pretty much it about Maid. It was a really interesting series, and I was happy to see that she pulled herself out of it. And I'm always proud of a woman that pulls herself out of a domestically violent situation, because no woman deserves to be treated like that and to be abused. No one mother gave birth to them so that they could be here and be abused by the likes of anyone. And that is my philosophy. And so that's why I wanted to share this video with you. Hopefully the information has been helpful. I'm going to link some DV information down below for resources, and if you have any questions, drop that in the comment section, and I will see you next time, and thank you again for watching. Bye bye.